Shabbat Shalom. If there is a lesson to be had and consolation to be found in the upcoming festival of Hanukkah, which begins Tuesday evening, it's that the challenges we face as American Jews are not as new as we may believe. Rising rates of intermarriage between Jew and non-Jew, a tug-of-war between our Jewish and secular commitments, the influence of our host culture on the Judaism we practice, the arguments over who is a Jew and what is Judaism, and the terms by which one may or may not convert to Judaism, none of these questions are without precedent in Jewish history. As the book of Ecclesiastes teaches, Ein chadash tachat hashamesh, there is nothing new under the sun. The debates of American Jewry, torturous as they may be, are merely the latest expressions of the hyphenated lives that Jews have always lived, perhaps most famously the Hellenistic Jews, to which we will turn our attention in the upcoming festival of Hanukkah. As students of Hanukkah may know, behind the tale of the miraculous cruse of oil that lasted well beyond its allotted time lies the question of whether the light of our Jewish lives can withstand the assimilating forces of our host society. In the case of Hanukkah, the culture was Hellenism, the Greek language, culture, and way of life brought to the world by Alexander the Great and his successors. The challenge was not merely one of living under Greek political rule. Rather, in the words of Professor Shia Cohen, it was how best to preserve Jewish identity while simultaneously partaking in the riches of Hellenistic culture, how to balance the conflicting claims of universalism and particularism, the desire to be part of the larger world and the desire to be separate and distinct. Evidence of Hellenizing influences on Jewish life abound, from the pottery and architecture we found in ancient Palestine, to the Greek language we know that the Jews spoke, to the import of Hellenistic ideas in our literature, case in point the book of Ecclesiastes, from which I just cited, whose philosophical outlook probably has more to do with Greek philosophy than with King Solomon's authorship. We've yet to find evidence of Adon Olam being sung to the melodies of Greek Broadway musicals, but if Hellenistic Jews had recorded their services on YouTube, I imagine we would find that too. The list goes on, but the most important thing to point out is that Jewish-Gentile intercourse, if you will, was not limited to art, literature, philosophy, or religion. Jews fell in love with non-Jews, and Jews sought to build lives together with non-Jews, crossing the boundaries from being one of them to one of us. Not surprisingly, it was during this time that we have the first document description of a convert to Judaism, an Ammonite general named Achior. As interpersonal contact increased between Jew and Gentile, communal boundaries were both defined and sometimes blurred. The manner by which one could cross those boundaries, by which a Gentile could become a Jew, or I suppose the other way around, became the source of much contention, which is where the Hanukkah story comes in. The heroics of the Maccabees is far more than just a military victory of the few against the many. As recounted in the first book of Maccabees, the community was divided between those Jews who sought to integrate Greek culture into Judaism and affirm their place in Hellenistic society, and the rejectionists, those who believed that only by way of boundary maintenance and social isolation could Jews withstand the forces of Greek culture. It was the Hellenizing Jews, most famously the Antiochus-appointed high priest Jason and then Menelaus, who sought to do away with the Jewish practices like kashrut, Shabbat, circumcision, and otherwise that served to separate Jews from the rest of society. And to make a long story a little less long, it was when those Hellenizing efforts resulted in the desecration of the temple that Judah Maccabee and his band of brothers rebelled, not just against the hand of the oppressor, but against any interaction, cultural, religious, or otherwise, between Jews and Greeks. The Battle of Hanukkah was not just between Jew and Greek, but also between two Jewish communal responses as to how best to thrive in a society where the line between Jew and non-Jew, Judaism and non-Judaism, was in a constant state of flux and redefinition. Charles Liebman, the late sociologist of religion, once explained the paradoxical relationship between increased and freer relations between Jew and Gentile and the rise of extremist tendencies. Because while it may not be surprising that there have always been those Jews who have embraced a robust exchange with their host culture, equally predictable, wrote Liebman, have been those Jews, like the Maccabees, who have responded to increasing Jewish-Gentile interaction with increased stringencies and social isolation. The debate between the Maccabees and the Hellenizing Jews was neither the first nor the final example of the culture wars resultant from Jews living in a non-Jewish context. Ever since Joseph and his brothers went down to Egypt, and maybe even before, Jews have debated how best to contend with this question. The best example probably being our own post-emancipation era, the promise of modernity being the collapse of intellectual, social, and political boundaries separating Jew from Gentile. Over these past few hundred years, many Jews have used this newfound freedom to affirm their place in non-Jewish culture and assimilate its influences into Judaism, while other Jews have seen the same phenomena in order to render even stricter interpretations of Jewish law and reject all that modernity has to offer. But whether one is studying 2nd century BCE Judaism or contemporary Jewish practice, practically speaking, the question is one and the same. Shall we be shields up or shields down? Shall we affirm our place in non-Jewish culture or reject it outright? There are many implications to this debate, from the music we sing here on Shabbat, to the rituals we observe, to the sort of community it is we want to build. For the purposes of our discussion today and our community conversation regarding communal boundaries that continues this Tuesday evening under Rabbi Zuckerman's leadership, the aspect of this discussion that I want to focus on is how it impacts our discussions regarding conversion to Judaism. As our winter speakers, Drs. Daniel Gordis and David Ellenson, make clear on the subject, the history of stringencies and leniencies on conversion stand in direct and inverse relationship to how Jews understand their relationship with non-Jews in their midst. Rejectionists, not surprisingly, see the upswing in Jewish-Gentile contact and increase their stringencies on what it takes to become a Jew, seeking not just to dissuade the would-be convert, but the very prospect that such a liaison with a once non-Jew would ever find sanction amongst our people. The most striking example I can think of is the 1935 proclamation of the Syrian Sephardic community to ban any of its members from marrying a convert of any kind, not a non-Jew, but a convert, a decree no doubt meant to be an iron wall against the openness of American culture. And while such a stance against any form of conversion whatsoever is hardly the norm, one need not be a rabbinic scholar or sociologist of religion to surmise that increasing stringencies regarding the process of conversion, the motivations of the would-be Jew, the behavioral expectations of the convert in order to become a Jew, and the revocability of that conversion once completed has more to do with this rejectionist posture vis-a-vis Jewish-Gentile relations than it does with one or another interpretation of Talmudic law. The greater the perceived challenge that contact with the non-Jewish world brings, the greater the stringencies regarding conversion here in Israel and everywhere else. None of which, of course, lets us off the hook here in the comfort of our progressive community. Time and again, I've stated from this pulpit my belief that we should be more, not less lenient on the subject of conversion. Such a position, I suppose, is consistent with my ongoing embrace of what it means to live the hyphen of being an American Jew. I see the numbers on intermarriage, nationally and in our community. I see it as my job to increase the number of Jews living Jewish lives. And yes, to be transparent, I choose to read rabbinic literature in a way that supports my point of view. But as our community finds its voice and takes its stance on the subject, I also have to be honest with myself and with you. Justifiable as it may be in my mind to be lenient on conversion, it's a leniency that can only be justified if we've also taken steps to assure that individuals or individual Jewish households go on to live engaged Jewish lives. A conversion program with integrity cannot just be about an intro class and a dip in the mikveh. It has to be a program aimed at creating robust Jewish identity before, during, and perhaps most importantly, after conversion. My goal is not, I don't think, to create Jews in name only. Such a stance seems to be beneath the dignity of my rabbinate and the Judaism that I love and defend as I do. My goal as a rabbi, Jewish educator, and communal leader is to be eyes wide open to the realities of American Jewish life, set a bar of Jewish living for every Jew and would-be Jew to aspire towards, and then provide the tools, community, setting, and inspiration by which that aspirational vision can be actualized. Without a doubt, I'm staking my rabbinate on the thesis that it's in the balancing act of Jewish and non-Jewish culture as encountered by me and the Jews I serve, not the rejection of the latter, by which a vital Jewish future can be found. It is a bet that I'm making because I believe that our tradition can thrive by way of an energetic dialogue with secular society, and that our Jews can integrate both non-Jewish influences and once non-Jews into our fold. It's a bet that I make because I believe that each of you and so many others, if given a compelling vision of Jewish life and living, will opt into that vision once given the chance. This Tuesday night, Jews around the world will light the first Hanukkah candles in our homes. The question we'll ask of ourselves is essentially the same one that was asked on the very first Hanukkah so many years ago. Will we, with our little cruse of oil, find the will, the wherewithal, and the wonder to make it last beyond the flicker of this moment? What prayers must we say? What programmatic steps must we take? What community must we build in order to ensure that our Judaism not only survives, but thrives into the days, years, and generations to come? Now and always, on this and on all things, I choose to bet on the Jews, on those who came before us, on each of you here today, and those who have yet to, but one day will, join the ranks of our people. Shabbat Shalom.